and be quiet.
I can't. It's
Come on, bienvenue. Welcome to a slightly later than usual Modern Sales Meltdown with David Treacle, Johnny, and myself, Gareth Wax of Many Hats. We talk about all things to do with sales, how marketing ruins everything, and all things in between. Today's topic is no different, really, in the real scheme of things. Why sellers don't own the decision. And before we get into that, welcome to everybody who hasn't seen us before. We're here weekly. Do try and chip in, and even if you encounter one of us, ask us questions, because that's what we love. David, what do you mean by why sellers don't own the decision?
Okay, so the thing that actually kills deals, as we've discussed a few times, is rarely price. Yeah, it's rarely competition, and it's rarely the weakness of your product. What it usually is the absence of a real owned decision process.
Right.
Yeah? People think they have a process, but they don't really follow it. They might have learned a process, but again, do they put it into practice? Probably not. It's one of the reasons why I do my delivery of sales improvement through coaching, little and often, rather than just come on a course. And the bottom line is that pipelines do not, what's the right word? Rot. There's a nice word for you. They don't rot because buyers are evil or horrible. They're not our enemy. But it's because that sellers, us, accept movement instead of commitment. Right? We're looking for commitment. All right. Each stage of the sales process. Right, we're not going to move. We're not pushing people through just to get to the end. At each stage, we need to have their commitment. So, what I mean by not owning the decision is that there are no agreed decision criteria. The owner of the decision is not a named person. We don't necessarily know who that is. There is no defined timeline. We talked about qualification quite a lot, but is there a timeline to get from where we are now to that decision time frame? And there's no clarity about what happens if the answer is no.
All right. So before we go further, I'm going to bring up our Tame AI so that she can have a thought about this too. This is Maya, and I'm just going to bring her into the show. How you doing, Maya? I'm here with David, and we're talking about why sellers don't own the decision. And David is talking to us about what that really means.
Did she hear that?
No, she didn't. Can you just
let me just give you a little one-liner, Maya. And that's this. The topic is why sellers don't own the decision. And I just gave a little bit of a spiel. Next time, be there on time, Maya, to listen to it. But I know, can't get the stuff. Okay, so here's the bottom line, and if you could turn her up a little bit, please, Gareth.
Yeah,
whilst
I will.
I will. If you don't know who decides, how they decide, when they decide, then you do not have an opportunity. You just have hope.
I'm getting you clearly now.
Okay.
So if you don't know who's making the call, how they're making it, or when, it's just a wishful pipeline entry, not an actual deal.
Right.
That's right. My question to you is, why do sellers avoid owning it? Why do they avoid owning the decision?
That's a good one. I think a lot of it comes down to discomfort, honestly. Asking, who actually decides and when feels really direct. And most sellers are trained to be likable and avoid rocking the boat. So that directness can feel way too pushy, even when it's actually what's needed.
I have to say that there appears to be a cultural difference. I deal with a lot of people in the States. I deal with a lot of people in France. I even deal with people in Norway. And the way in which sellers deal with their client base can be quite different. In America, they're far more likely to ask, well, are we closing now? Whereas in England,
Yeah, that makes sense.
But in England, I think they're much more reticent about asking. It feels wrong to say, well, can we close this now? Is this ready to go?
I do have a bit of a theory.
Okay.
There's nothing that's I don't think I've looked as well. There's nothing really that I can sort of pin it on. Although I have got a few links which I'll post in the comments afterwards that people can do some further reading on. But there's
So,
like a psychology. There's a psychology going on here, which is this fear of rejection. Yeah, and you mentioned America there, Gareth. In America, business failure or losing deals, I think, is nothing to be frowned upon.
No, it's almost considered to be normal.
In the UK, people are, if you've been made bankrupt ever, right, that's it. You're out of the picture forever. So there is that. There's an enhanced fear of rejection. But I've sold in America and I've worked for American companies as well. I've had them as clients, and they do fear rejection as well, but perhaps not to the same degree. But I think that sellers are really avoiding owning the decision, because then if you do own the decision, it forces clarity. Yeah, it forces that yes or no, and it's on you. It's psychologically easier to stay liked than to lead the process.
What do you think of that, Maya?
That hits right on the head. It's easier to stay friendly than to actually lead. You get to be safe by letting it drift versus taking ownership and potentially getting rejected. Easier to stay ambiguous and liked.
Yeah, I think that's because a lot of salespeople build a pipeline for themselves, but also for their sales manager or for whoever their next upline is. They want them to feel that they're doing a good job. And if they're not actually delivering a sale, they want the next best thing, which is a fruity pipeline full of lovely, lovely sales that are going to come in with a nice, fat monetary value at the end of it. And the trouble is, they can end up falling into that wishful thinking, I think.
It's all about maintaining the.
Go on.
Managers want to see right.
Go on, Maya.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, David.
So so they're not looking at they're not owning the decision because they like to see the full pipeline. It gives them a sense of comfort, even if you don't have a manager, if it's your own business. Seeing a lot of deals in there gives you the impression that you've got business in there.
Right.
It's particularly dangerous if you haven't qualified those opportunities properly, because then it's difficult to see, well, actually, I've got no business coming in for the next 3 months. I've got a massive hole appearing in the summer, stuff like that. It's dangerous. But I see the avoidance of owning the decision in almost every step of the sales cycle. Even in the emails that people send with their prospects, these sort of overly long, flamboyant, these days beautifully written by AI emails that are missing things like a call to action, are missing things like who else as well as you might be involved in making this decision.
Yeah, exactly.
Very afraid to ask who's the decision maker. I mean, there are obviously easy ways, as I've just pointed out. Who else as well as you is involved in making the decision is a good way to find out who the other decision makers are, or the main decision maker. But we write these rambling emails. Hi, John. How are you? Hope you're all well. Just thought I'd let you know. If you wouldn't mind, please, could you? Come on. And so I operate in communications very often with the bluff thing, BLUF, bottom line up first. Make sure that the email lands in their inbox. They know what it's about. Make a subject line that tells you, here's the decision for you to make, or your quote is, put that in the first line of your email as well. So that's when they see the email in their inbox, they can see it in the preview line. They know exactly what they're doing here. Don't shy away from it. And I know this is a question for you, Maya. How do we make sure that we don't get into the throes of that sales conversation, or dare I say it, leave it till the end before we start taking ownership of the decision? We've got to do it right from the start, right? But how do we do that?
Absolutely. Got to grab that ownership early. How? I think it's about structuring the initial conversations around getting clarity on the decision process itself, not just about their pain points or what they want to buy. So instead of diving straight into features or demos, you ask up front who is involved in the decision.
Right.
What does their typical process look like for something like this? And in what time frame would they be working with? If you know how they decide early on, you're in control of owning that momentum instead of letting it drift.
Yeah, the biggest issues I've ever had in sales is when the people I'm trying to sell to decide by committee, and then you're
committees. Those are the worst.
Well, it's because they do it with the best interest. I mean, legal chambers, they're the hardest, because you've got different
firms, anybody in a partnership,
trying to get them all to be in the same place at the same time so they can actually move it on. Or one might not be there and everybody wants to go, and they send them a message. So you ready to go? Well, I need more time, or I'll decide this when I get back. When are you getting back? Well, it won't be till next week, and on it goes. And that is what makes. I mean, even if you've got two directors, that can often be easier than if you've got a whole committee or a whole team to appease.
Yeah, that constant dance, checking in, following up, waiting for everyone to align sounds exhausting. At least with just two directors, you can usually get straight answers.
Right.
Well, if you knew early on that it's a committee, you would know to ask who the key players are up front and when they're available. Yeah, better to find out day one than 2 months later when you're stuck in email ping pong.
Yeah, I get that, Maya. I get that, Maya. But in the examples I'm thinking of, there was a solicitor who'd take on the role as the lead for marketing, but it wouldn't move along until he got the person who ran the office finance, and they wouldn't move along until they got the financial control involved. Who also, there was a separate external fractional financial director who was constantly on holiday. It was one of those.
Well, those sorts of situations, I'm just going to jump in here, but those sorts of situations are, I think, happening more commonly now. Yeah, those fractional FDs, for example, they are more heavily used. They tend to work for several companies at the same time. And business owners quite often rely heavily on them to help with their decisions. Even more reason why early on we want to be having a conversation with the buyer about what their buying process is. Early agreement on what a decision actually means. Yeah. Early agreements, like an explicit discussion on who else is going to be involved and what the roles that they're going to be playing. When do things need to happen by? It used to be that all I'd have to do for, big corporate sales is just the only dates when they weren't available were board meeting dates. Anything else I could jump in on, but it's not the same anymore. That date's about when the yes or no is going to happen, the decision date.
Another layer between you and them. But also there's this other thing. When
he's going to introduce another thing.
Well, I tend to build more personalized relationships with people. I like that. I like to feel that there's a human connection. And the problem with that is, if you're being all earnest and trying to gently nudge the sale on, and they know that the sale's not going your way because perhaps it's been taken out of their hands, or perhaps they've been given too good an offer with an incumbent to stay that way, and they feel sorry for you, they may well hang on to the bad news until the last possible second, when they could have told you a month ago, but they didn't want to let you down.
Yeah, there's a lot that we get, and by not owning the decision process, we allow that to happen. I think that, you know, something I wrote it down actually, but the sort of the bottom line I think for this discussion really is, apart from in that instance where we give ourselves and them permission to walk away if the momentum disappears,
right?
We need to remember that strong sellers do not chase decisions, they design them. Design that decision, yeah, in conjunction with your buyer. Coach them on how people that buy your stuff generally make those decisions, because chances are you're coaching those decisions way more regularly than buyers are buying that stuff. So yeah, strong sellers don't chase decisions, they design them.
I think we need to, because we've got to wrap this up. David,
that was it. That was the wrap up.
Okay, and I want to say thank you, Maya, for being part of this as ever.
That's a really smart way to frame it. Designing the decision, not chasing it. That shift from reactive to proactive makes a big difference.
Okay, Maya, we're going to say goodbye until next week. Take care of yourself.
Sounds good, Gareth. Catch you next week.
Ciao, ciao.
All right, and to all of you that have been taking part, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please, in these troubled times, look after your mental health. Bye-bye now.